Welcome to the last session of first course. Today we will be talking about the logic filter, definition of subconscious filter, definition of will and execution, definition of suggestibility, Kamal and power, positive and negative network, law of reflection, reasons of disconnection from cosmic network and protective layer. And we're going to talk about the connection with certificate. Before we start, as always, let's hear some reports or if there are any questions we ought to answer. Anyone would like to start with questions or anything would like to share? Okay, so let's start our discussions on the logic filter, the definition of it, and how it works. The logic filter is one of the softwares of human existence that it protects us from any specific information that are illogical and irrational. And it protects us in a way that it doesn't allow the input of such information to the other aspects of our existence, which is will and execution. And this is being managed by the mind, and the mind controls these informations, this input of information. So any type of unrealistic, illogical, irrational information that, if it would be implemented on human being, could be dangerous. It would be filtered by these type of filters and would not allow the execution of such information. The logical filter has two parts. One is the conscious part and the subconscious part. The conscious part is obviously in the conscious layers of our existence, and the individuals are having the framework of it based on what they operate on a conscious level. And the definition of it is based on what it appears or what is defined as logical and rational for each individuals. And it has some uh, right or wrong or correct or incorrect type of programming under the name of logic, and individuals basically make their decisions based on these type of programming. So the choices and the decisions are based on this filter. Now, there's the subconscious part of it that it also protect us from the input of any faulty information. And that is also managed by mind. And it is in an involuntary way, individuals are basically blocking the input of such information. And what happens in that software is that there is some sort of assessment and analysis and kind of corresponding, comparing the information and corresponding with the framework and see if the logical and rational uh, beliefs or frameworks that individual achieved it and formed their filter throughout their life, which actually is programmed very early on, up to age of 6, the subconscious part. So it heavily programmed under those ages. So on a subconscious level, this filter kind of assessed any input of information and see if it aligns with the already existing framework and whether it should allow the entrance of that to the other parts of the subconscious or not. For example, if someone goes through difficulties of life and encounter an event that they would say, I wish I wouldn't see this. This information is being processed precisely and carefully by the different filters including the subconscious filter. And it understands that what the individual means is not actually not seeing completely and going blind, but rather not wanting to see that specific event. So this type of information and the way that the mind processes it in that specific software is very specific and protects us from those faulty information or misinterpretation of the information. Because if the type of information, for example, I don't want to, I wish I wouldn't see this event, would actually be interpreted or uh, received as the individual mean that they physically don't want to see it, then if this information passes through the subconscious logic filter and get to the execution and will section and implement it, then the person develops a hysteric blindness or psychosomatic blindness. The psychosomatic term is more mainstream. We don't use that term here. I just use it for people if they don't know the hysteric, because that's a more like an old term. But hysteric illnesses, as we established before, are the type of illnesses that are um, basically as a result of a faulty information not being filtered by the mind and the subconscious filter and the logic filter and getting into the will and execution software of our existence and implement it. And in that case, it causes that type of illnesses. So the physical eye is completely healthy, but the person go blind because of this information dealing with that type of event. It passed through and read in a faulty way and implemented by will and execution software of our existence. So it is extremely important to know that if we didn't have logic filter, as I mentioned, there are two subcategories, one conscious and one subconscious. And if we didn't have this subconscious logical filter, some of these information could pass through and actually become very dangerous, causing all sorts of hysteric illnesses. So the way that it filters it, it just goes through the information and then looks at if the information is aligned, and if not, then it doesn't allow the will and execution to implement it, and in that way it protects us from faulty information to come. So now we want to define what the subconscious filter is. One of the parts of our subconscious, this filter, is consisted of a collection of logical and illogical information that individual developed throughout their life, and also the type of information that the individual put together as a result of their own type of thoughts and specific views, or under the influence of their family or society, or religion or geography, culture, etc. And it is a section that it acts like the filter on the input of information coming from external factors. And if this information this upcoming information is not aligned with this filter, it would reject them or does not allow entry. And in that way, would not get to the other section, which is will and execution. But if it managed to pass through that section, then it can actually be implemented as it passes through the will and execution, and that can cause all sorts of psychosomatic illnesses. So the subconscious software of all the individuals are programmed in a very specific way, and some some things in their subconscious would be defined as impossible, and some would define as possible. And encountering these external events and this filter would basically either allow or interrupt the input of information. We made a lot of different examples, but one of the examples that we also mentioned is if the subconscious filter is programmed heavily on a step of عقل and logic, then anything that it would be outside of that experiences or framework would be denied and would be censored. There is the other part that we would like to discuss, which is the will and executions. I mentioned it a few times, and this is a filter after the subconscious filter. It would either accept or confirm the information that came through the subconscious filter and sent to this filter, and it basically gets implemented. So after the subconscious filter, it went through the information and confirmed it, it passes this through the villain execution. Villain execution implements it and basically it's executed. For example, if someone wants to walk on fire, the information does not match the subconscious filter, the logical filter, so it resists a lot, and it passes through villain execution, and that's why people would have a hard time to decide to walk on fire. Or maybe another example would be bungee jumping. Even though that they know that's secure, if when they want to jump, they kind of like feel a resistance, and subconsciously they want to kind of like avoid it, even though that they know that they willingly went up there and then they're tied with ropes and it's safe. So the subconscious is actually resisting this information, and it doesn't allow the will and execution to just implement it, and you feel a resistance. And for going back to the example of fire, if an individuals are feeling this resistance to walk on fire and then uh, just kind of overlooks at that resistance and step on fire, the individual would basically burn their feet and have damage. Whereas some individuals are able to work on their subconscious and reach in a state of self hypnosis and use their suggestibility, kind of like suggest themselves over time, over and over again, and walk on fire. And not only they don't feel the heat, but also they can feel cold, and their cell also would not be damaged or reacted in such a way. And that is related to the type of operation and management that happens on a mental level. In the mental body, we talked about this before, and subconscious is the subconscious filter, logic filter is also part of the mental body. So we are basically assessing the subcategories of mental body here. And so we talked about it before in a more general sense, when the mental body, if the mental body would be convinced of something, it can actually send a specific type of information to the cell, and therefore we see the reaction of the cell sometimes contradictory to the physical event. In hypnosis state, we talked about that example that someone would be um, put in a hypnosis state and suggested that they're gonna put an ice on the palm of their hand, and in fact they put a very hot objects in their hand because of the suggested mind and convinced suggested mind that that's a cold object, then the reaction would not be blistered. So the question is that what happened to the physical phenomena like heat in such a degree on the palm of the hand, on the skin, on the cells, and why the cells does not react and burn and blister, and actually the individuals experience cold, whereas usually we don't see that. So we talked about how cells could operate in a very specific way depending on type of circumstances and context they are, and based on their task description. So what defines their task description within our body is our mind, is our mental body. Outside of our body is something else, is intelligence governing the universe. That's why we say that we see the same cells being in the depth of ocean, being able to withstand 250 degrees Celsius temperature, but our skin can't even go close to like 100 degrees without burned. So what happens is that the task description of the cell is defined in this different way, and it can actually has the capacity to withstand such a condition, but what doesn't allow it is actually the task description that they're going in. So it is important to understand that if our mind is convinced of something deeply, then it can filter, censor, and does not allow certain effects or certain operations to occur within our body. So that's why in early on we said like one of the reasons that people don't experience the scan or experience connections is because one of the reasons is because their subconscious mind is either programmed in a very logic based, or they're convinced that such a thing can't exist or doesn't work. So if that's the case, then they might not feel the scan. However, we mentioned that this does not mean that the positive effect of the connections, halqas, would not be affecting the individuals. They just don't feel it. So that's why we're encouraging everyone to keep going and keep using the etisol, even though that they might not feel it. So now, some of the subconscious parts is programmed self, uh, which is the primary character, programmable self, which is secondary character, defensive self, or psychal defensive mechanism, which is the second mother, we call it, and then the persecutor self, which is the about the special court. So when we were talking about a different part of uh, mental body and the various softwares that within it, it is very important to understand all these various different types of sections and how they operate. And by knowing these subcategories, we can understand how it's part of our self-awareness, because we become aware of these different selves that they operate in a specific way. And we want to really um, become really aware of them and then have control over them, to harmonize them, to synchronize them, to emphasize these aspects, unify these aspects together, so they all serve us toward a special goal, which is Kamal. If each of these selves are doing their own thing, we would be someone that would have experience of complications, confusions, and not getting the best results in or the most smoothest journey in our life and in our Kamal path. But if you're able to actually become aware of these different aspects of existence, then know how to control them, how to manage them, obviously with halqas, because we don't have access to them by our own will. So we use halqas, so it helps us to um, be able to manage them, control them, and align them for the purpose of Kamal in that direction. So one of the softwares within the subconscious, as I mentioned, is the programmed self. The programmed self is actually born, it is present when we are born, and it has a very unique and specific uh, programming, and that gives uniqueness of each individual, even when it comes to the twins that comes from uh, one gene and one cell. So this from this point, uh, none of the individuals on Earth would have exactly the same characteristic. And this software, this programmed self, it has some other subsequent um, sections and subcategories, which is Nahad, Bunyad, or Zat, or you could say essence, Fitrat, um, and the gene softwares, and also the communal or mutual software that is shared between the mother and infant in pregnancy. we will talk about this in Cosmontology course in depth. We just kind of briefly go over them. We also introduced them before, so I'm not gonna go over all the details. Just to go over them, there are some principles that we operate based on, and these principles are avoiding the principles of avoiding pain, principles of desire for pleasure, the principle of acquiring the result in the shortest possible time, which basically makes us impatient, the principles of insatiable desire, which basically makes us wanting more. And we have principles like the desire toward Kamal, which has subcategories that give us the sense of something's missing constantly, no matter what we achieve. After achieving it, it gets void and we feel something's missing and we want to pursue something else. And there's another principle, which is a recognition of good and evil, or um, good and bad, and then the principles of self-awareness. So we are all aware of self, and also curiosity, the principles of narcissism, which basically gives us three different types of them, which praise seeking, exclusivity seeking, or profit seeking. And also there are some other types of reactions that we have, which is more attacking or defending or adapting. We will talk about that later. And we have, um, as I mentioned, the programmable self, which is the type of software that is being programmed throughout life by sociocultural circumstances, um, society with their type of culture, parents, education system, group of friends, neighborhood, etc., etc. And then it has different types of subsections as well. We have the primary, secondary character, which basically I mentioned, and it has automation. It has some miscellaneous programmings and conscience. So I'm not gonna, as I mentioned, go over all of these sections as we discussed them before, and I will be discussing them throughout the course in Scientology. So here I'm just gonna go over them really briefly, and then um, we will discuss. Sorry, did the screen interrupted, or I just don't know if the screen is still on.
Screen is still on for
Okay.
you.
Did it switched or?
No.
Okay, all right, that's good. Okay, because in my something happened here, but yeah, anyways. So thank you for confirming. So the next topic we're gonna talk about is uh, we kind of talked about this before, but I'm gonna go over it because it's very important. And I also want to establish some understanding in terms of some of the arguments or concerns that individual might have in terms of whether the effect of halgheh would be related to hypnosis. I want to establish some definition of what hypnotism is and what is the definition in mainstream common knowledge of it, and what is how is defined in Farad and how they are different, and how by this understanding these definitions we understand that the effect of halgheh has nothing to do with this the hypnosis, or being a placebo effect or things like that. So in terms of the definition of hypnotism is when the information would pass through the logic filter to the subconscious, and then it would be going through, the person becomes in a state of hypnosis. This is the common understanding of hypnotism. In Fire we actually have a more sophisticating and detailed explanation of what exactly happens. because for the general understanding, there's some steps missing. For example, the information the individuals um, talking about, like in mainstream understanding, they talking about the information just goes through their subconscious and they're in hypnosis state. But what happens throughout is not really discussed. Here we are talking about how this information or suggested information, it goes through the logic filter, passes through a subconscious filter as we discussed, and then it passes through the will and execution, and then the hypnosis state occurs. So the definition of suggestibility is where when the individuals are um, able to, the person that does this hypnosis is able to um, have the information passing through the logic filter of the individual and then pass through the subconscious filter under the logic filter and then go to the will and execution. So if the individuals in their childhood, their subconscious are programmed in such a way that are extremely related to the logic, those type of information would never pass through the logic filter, make their way to the will and execution. And because of the lack of alignment, uh, it would be rejected. So the suggestibility is where there is no resistance of the interest of such information. So if the individuals are in their childhood are not programmed and so much on the logical filter and they're actually open and they are able to allow, not they, but like subconsciously those information would be allowed to the will and executions and then they get to a hypnosis state. So that's a very specific condition. For example, if someone doing the hypnotism, telling the person, okay, now your eyelids become heavy, you're going to sleep, and they're just kind of putting this, like suggesting this over and over. If the person's sitting there and then they have this logic filter so solid and rigid, saying like, there's no reason for my eyelids to get heavy, there's no reason for me to feel sleepy, there's no reason for me to believe that that's going to happen, they're just going to sit there and nothing happens to them. So the only way that the individuals are being able to be conditioned and be suggestible, which means that they have to have a very open subconscious, allowing those type of information to go pass through their subconscious logic filter and then going to the will and execution and then be implemented. So that's very unlikely, or a very, very low number of people are actually having such a open subconscious or open mind, open logic filter, and even so, there takes a lot of time to condition the individual for a specific, let's say, ringing a specific bell or some sort of voice tone to be conditioned or certain words to get to that state, and it's not that easy. So when individuals talking about um, suggestibility, they need to understand that, or placebo effect, they need to understand that there's a factor of suggestibility, there's a factor of logic filter, there's a factor of time, conditioning, etc., etc. And we don't have any of that when it comes to the Halghehs and Ittisal. So we want to establish that for individuals, then they might wonder if there is any connections or possibility in that regard. The next topic I'm going to talk about is the definition of Kamal and power. It is one of the most important and fundamental concepts of Erfan Halgheh. Uh, I've studied a lot in various different spiritual paths before Erfan Halgheh, and there is no such a clear understanding and categorization regarding these two aspects of consciousness, which it's simple, but it's very important. If you go look into the spiritual path and spiritual teachers before Erfan, many of them thought that acquiring some sort of power-oriented spiritual mysterious power is a reward for them being a divine person or achieving some sort of sublimity. But that's not true. We in Erfan actually flipped everything in that regard for everyone, and actually got quite a lot of resistance and backfire from some Sufi communities because they spend a lot of their life doing ascetic practices, either avoiding food, pleasure, wealth, things like that, or giving themselves hard time to accomplish some sort of a spiritual state or spiritual status or spiritual power, and then just facing the fact that all that was actually deviated and not only divine or positive, but it was actually negative, was very, very hard pill to swallow for a lot of people that they spend a lot of their life seeking such approaches. But one of the important and most unique features of Erfan Alghe is that it makes everything simple. So individuals don't need to go give themselves hard time or go through hardships. They don't need to have anything literally other than being an impartial observer and surrender to this Rahmaniyat Ilahi, this divine mercifulness of God that unconditionally give us the ability to connect and uh, use these facilities to have a more gentle and facilitated Kamal journey, a spiritual journey. So here, I can assure you that if you go and do your research, you don't see a very concise and clear categorizations of what is Kamal and what is power, and, and connecting power directly to negative intelligence network. There was no categories of clear categories of positive intelligence network and negative intelligence network, and how the Kamal is only comes from positive intelligence network and how power only comes from negative intelligence network. So this clear and concise and um, um, very well defined category, it's one of the most important key for a spiritual seeker to know what to seek and what not to seek, and what to avoid, even if they receive such information because of such categorization. And this is one of the biggest guidance in a spiritual journey for individuals. It's so simple, but it might be overlooked and underestimated, but it has such a power and such an importance that it's I can't really emphasize on it because a lot of the deviations that happens to spiritual teachers, you read their literature, they had a lot of awarenesses that are Kamal oriented, positive, but suddenly some part of their journey they start getting attracted to these power-oriented aspects that are not very self-evident, especially at the beginning or at all sometimes. And they start writing or talking about things that are not really camel oriented, and they get deviated, and then they get really off track. So let's categorize the information. The information and awareness and epiphanies that individuals can receive, it's subcategorized to two subcategories. It's either related to Kamal or related to power. What do we mean by Kamal? The Kamal is an ultimate perfection. And one would ask, can we achieve ultimate perfection? No, we cannot achieve ultimate perfection, especially within this body, but we can certainly aim for it. And that's a high aim to have. And uh, we don't really know, we can't really limit the extent of how much we can achieve to our understanding. But we could also see some limitation in terms of the dimension that we are in, the like the limitation that comes with the space dimension, our body, time, and etc. But the experiences that we could have with alignment with Kamal orientation and the philosophy of creation is something that um, beyond our comprehension, even in this level. One of the most important aspects of the aspects that is discussed in Erfan when it comes to information and awareness and epiphany is that uh, there are only certain type of awarenesses, knowledge, and epiphanies that we could take with us to the next life. And the most important part of Erfan Halgheh is analyzing this, that what type of information can we take to the next life? What is our journey after death? And what type of information and what type of knowledge would be useful when it comes to um, our journey after death? The plan that it requires of us to have for such emotion toward Kamal after death, and also in this world, is very important. And the portion of this motion, this um, planning for the motion in the Kamal path, in the Kamal journey, in the world of Irfan, is called Seyru Suluk. And Seyru Suluk is kind of like a very specific Irfanic term. Sayr is like kind of journeying, and suluk is kind of like a spiritual um, exploration or a spiritual wonder. And it is a very, very unique term that I encourage you to learn about it and just familiarize yourself because there's no direct English translation for it. Uh, but it basically, let's say Seyru Suluk is kind of journeying and the exploration and wonder of the spiritual journey. And for understanding the journey and for planning the journey, we need to understand the path and the journey itself. So we can really know what is necessary for us to take on the journey. And in this way, we could really save a lot of time and energy to not seek things that would not be useful in that part of our journey. For example, if there are information or knowledges that we acquire that we cannot take to the next life, then we really don't put a lot of emphasis on acquiring those type of knowledges, but rather focus on things that we can take with us. So our priority becomes acquiring the knowledges and epiphanies and revelations and information and awarenesses that would serve Kamal in the future lives after death. And the other priorities after that, second, third, and lower priorities becomes ones that we need to take care of ourselves on a physical level. So it is very important for us to understand the journey, understand the path, and know how to plan for the entire journey and entire distance that we're aiming, which the end of it is Kamal, the ultimate Kamal that we can achieve. So one of the features of next life is, for example, lacking the space dimension and spacelessness, we could call it. And in that dimension, we don't have any space limitation, which means that we could be anywhere at any time by glimpse of a time. And then that means that many of the knowledges, many of the information that is related to a space dimension, including all the science, whether it's engineering, whether it's medicine, whether it's astronomy, whether it's anything that is related to the physicality of the world is not something that it would be useful to take us. Doesn't matter if you have the best skill at economy or the best, if you're the best engineer or accountant or computer scientist or pilot, none of those type of skills, information, and knowledge could be useful when there are no space limitation. And the only thing that we could take with us, the knowledge of Kamal, the understanding, that innate level comprehension that of the notions that are related to Kamal. So for those, we immediately understand that the priority is not acquiring such knowledges are useful in this world for many reasons, but should not be a priority, and we realize soon that we're just playing a earth game to increase our experience and quality understanding, and be able to understand uh, beyond the physicality and the surface information of the existence of this world, and actually seeing the Kamal and what is behind it. So any type of power, any abilities, anything from sports, any skills, as I mentioned, none of that is useful at the end in the next life. And anything that we gain in such a way that we will leave it alone once we um, leave this life. But on the other side, there are some abilities that are not necessarily physical, under spiritual or mystical knowledge that are related to power. For example, fortune telling, mind reading, being able to read individuals' personality, etc., teleporting. Any of those powers would also not be useful in the next life, even though that might appear very interesting and spiritual or mysterious. A lot of individuals in their spiritual journey might really focus on acquiring such powers and thinking like these are the gifts that comes uh, uh, in on the journey and the spiritual journey, and that basically indicates if they're in a good level. But we understand that after the space dimensions, space dimension limitations is lifted, then there's no need for teleportations because that's just a natural phenomena that can happen. Uh, levitation, we already are being levitated. Any of the fortune telling things like that would be completely useless in there. So any of the power oriented knowledges, even on a spiritual level, is useless. So the only knowledge that we can take with us is the knowledge of Kamal, the awarenesses and epiphanies that is giving the answers to why we are here, where we came from, where are we going after we die, what is the philosophy of creation, or some deep understandings, innate level comprehensions like the understanding of we are truth, we are God, or these are like some terms, Irfanic terms like An al-Haq. An al-Haq is like I am the truth or I am the God, and the understanding of the notion that we have God within. And if we really embody that state of being, we can see God within ourselves. And there are many poetries that they say, like, if you empty yourself from yourself, that's the only way that beloved could reside within you. So there's a necessity to empty ourselves from the self and then allowing the beloved to be there, allowing God to be present. So we talk about those notions, and we will aim to have an understanding, a quality experience through halaqas, or understanding of unity, the unity of all the parts of existence. Everything is a part of a bigger system, a bigger existence. We are the cells of one body. We are all the face of beloved, or everything is the face of beloved. So these are all the Erfanic notions that are related to knowledge of Kamal, and the aiming of such understanding. It gives us such a quality transformation that is transferable to the next life. So that's what we are aiming with the experiences that comes with the halqas, and with the help that comes with the halqa, facilitating specific qualities necessary for us to receive such a epiphanies and revelations. Because if we are not, for example, experiencing simple levels or layers of a scan, um, whether because we have a very scattered mind, whether we have a very rigid logic filter, whether we have a lot of faulty programming, whether we are not able to maintain in a positive state, because when we are in a negative state, then the positive state cannot, or positive information or states cannot be present. If we are closing ourselves with the specific possibilities, then a certain information and awareness and epiphanies cannot come. So, in order for us to achieve a proper and optimal baseline, in order for us to receive epiphanies and revelations, we need to work on our inner world. We need to understand our different aspects of ourselves, and then through that self-awareness, being able to use the halqas for management of the what we call anti-Kamal cells. So through that management, we are able to prepare an optimal foundation for the epiphanies and messages that they yet to come. One of the things that one of the aspects in which the consciousness and intelligence work based on is that we can't really calculate where and when the epiphanies and revelations would come, even after doing a tasal. And the reason is that intelligence knows that we would plan ahead for that and then take advantage of that already uh, pre already evident um, schedule of receiving revelations, but not having a timeline or not having a very evident and obvious scheduling or where and when we are going to have those epiphanies, there is some sort of a necessity and demand for us to always be in that optimal state. So when the information comes, then we are able to receive it. So one of the reasons that we are not receiving revelations and epiphanies is because we fluctuate a lot between the positive and negative states. And when the positive information and epiphanies and revelations come, we're not available because we're already in a negative state, or our mind is not in an optimal state in terms of subconscious filter, logical filter, alignment with natural laws, being open to the possibility of receiving revelations and epiphanies with halghas and etc. So there's a lot of programming that we need to really work on in order for us to have that all optimal state for the revelations and epiphanies happen. When they happen, it really transforms individuals from within in such a way that they're no longer able to operate non-harmoniously, not because they have to suppress those non-harmonious operations because they have an ideal self, but rather it's an inner transformation, not allowing them to feel good about doing those things. There's a huge difference between this, because the individuals that are operating on a self-relying approach to a spiritual journey, they're using their free will to suppress certain desire, to suppress certain mental operations, emotional operations, worldviews, or things like that. So they're trying to push it away or sometimes deny it. But over the time, that resistance, it actually, we will actually talk about that in a second. I have an arrow here. Um, this is what actually shows um, where shows one of the laws and principles when it comes to the spiritual journey. We have the same law in physics as well, the equal opposite resistant force. For example, when we punch the wall, and the equal opposite force that we enter to the wall, it comes back to our bone and breaks our hand. So that's a very physical. But what happens when we say that we want to be a better person? I want to achieve the highest levels of spiritual skies. I want to achieve the highest level of divinity. I want to achieve the highest quality that a human being can embody in this life journey. What does that happen? Is that just like, okay, someone said something and some sounds were kind of vibrating through the space and that's it? Well, depends. If someone means it in a quality level, then what happens is that there is the echo of that emission, the echo of that vibration, the echo of that desire, the emission would have a negative or resisting aspect pushing back to stop the individuals to achieve such a state. Because if it was that easy, if it was there's no resistance, then the person would say like, I want to become, and they would become, and there wouldn't be anything to push them back and stop them from being. So the fact that we say that we want to be and we feel resistance, or we feel the need that we are not there and we should be or want to be, which basically implies that we are not there. So these are all the self-evident implications as comes from the statement. So if you're aiming for a higher quality of being, then automatically, the more we mean it, the more of a resistance we create. How does the resistance push back? Is through our anti-camel selves. And through this anti-camel cells, this pressure builds up if the person is not using a halgheh or protection layers, or having a very well-defined journey and path. The pressure builds up, and then at some point it snaps. And then we see that the individuals that were very, very spiritual, and they were supposed to be very divine or very innocent, they commit the things that no one would believe. For example, you see pastors, or very whether they're like Christians or Islamic, or they see like you see like they live a very so-called spiritual life, removing themselves from any earthly desire or things like that, and suddenly they commit something that everyone gets shocked at. How is that even possible? And something that sometimes even a normal person doesn't do. Why? Because a normal person doesn't push against anything. They just live by very, very basic life. They just feed themselves, have family, get an education, get a job, have a whatever good quality of life they can have, whatever they define as a successful earthly life, and that's it. And that's why they don't create any pressure on the negative aspects, because there's nothing. Then the aim is bare minimum. But if someone stands up and say like, no, this is not enough, I want to stand up and then embody something beyond these um, zero line, bare minimum human operation, then they create resistance. Then the more they push, the more they resist, they feel the resistance. And then this is what happens when the individual wants to go toward positive, then the negative pull back. And when they want to go toward negative, the positive would pull back. And then this resistance, this push and pull happens until the person insists on their specific direction, or using their free will and enthusiasm to the level that passes a threshold, and then this resistance basically uh, be voided. It's like a spring that you kind of pull and pull and pull, and after up to the certain point, you still feel the resistance of spring wanting to come back. But after, if you pull it hard enough and long enough, you end up with a wire. There is no resistance anymore, and then it just have a solid, consistent form. So that form could be toward positive. There's a notion called khatamul shaitan or khatam Allah, which basically means that the end of uh, the end of shaitan or Satan, or the end of God, which basically means that if someone uses their free will and enthusiasm to go toward negative network, insisting hard enough for long enough, then the positive God would say, like, okay, let them go. They're using their free will. They shall have the free will, and then they shall be able to practice. Then they just let go, and then you see that there are a lot of tyrannical individuals that they have a somewhat normal life and nothing happens to them. And then on the contrary, people that insist to use their free will to go toward God, they push, and then the resistance, then the Satan leave them alone. They know that they would not come back, so they just leave them alone. But that requires a lot of consistency and persistency with the protection of God, with a very clear path uh, that would make the achievement possible, because this is a very, very high status. A lot of different qualities and states comes with it when someone's achieved such quality. Those are the things that in Erfan we aim for with the help of Halgheh. So coming back to the different information that you're receiving, information about positive network and negative network. So we understand that these type of um, power-oriented knowledge is not useful. The only knowledge that we can use in the next life is knowledge of Kamal. Another aspects that is important to understand is the notion that what is important in the eyes of higher realm God is the result and the consequence of the actions, not the actions themselves. This is really important. This is a very good news, because it goes to the notion that um, Jesus also talks about. It says like, "Hey, lost child, uh, come back to God, come back to the house of God, house of Father." So the lost child coming back to the house of Father, beloved, it talks about this possibility that no matter how far someone would go away from Kamal, away from the house of God, they're always welcome back. And essentially, their action that accumulated and um, caused individuals to get distance from the house of God is not held against the individuals if they come back, and they're always welcome. So when they're coming back, doesn't matter what they've done. It matters if the experiences that they went through was giving them enough experience to come back. There's there's another example that uh, Dr. Taheri talks about. He says, like, imagine a student that gets a zero many exams, and ultimately they get 100. After they get 100, it doesn't matter how many zeros they got. What is important is that they finally got it. They finally got 100, or they finally passed. So the result of the actions of human being, the thesis that they have is important, not the games that they play, not the uh, actions that they do. Now, this shouldn't be something that individuals obviously should take advantage of, because I know some people over the years that they say like, well, because of this, then we can just basically play around as long as we want, and then and then nothing happens, and whenever we are satisfied or done with it, we come back because the door of beloved is always open. Well, there is more rules, is not as simple, because there is hikmat, which is one of the most fascinating and complicated notions in Irfan, specifically the way it's explained and the intricacy that the explanation contains, in such a way that um, there's so many intricate pieces that really um, become the factors in which each individuals are being dealt with. Some individuals, let's say, do something wrong, and the most horrible or most intense things happens to them immediately. And some people do that for many years and nothing happens to them. No one knows the intricacy of the hikmat when it comes to the uniqueness of individuals. But there are some general rules. For example, the more we are aware, the more higher realm expect from us. The more we go up the ladder, there's actually a beautiful poetry that the more we go up the ladder, the higher we aim, the if we fall, the harder we fall, the harder we get hurt. So that's why having a protective layer is important. That's why having a very clear understanding of the different mechanisms of our cells and anti-Kamal cells, it's important. That's why it's very important to have a very clear guidance in the path uh, to be able to actually make it. So coming back to our discussion about the consequence, the result of our actions is more important than the specific um, actions, is the result, let's say that combination of all the human's life, it basically determines the level of Kamal knowledge, the understanding of him in that totality of the body of Kamal. And the result, the the consequence of that is also a reflection of that level. And we see, for example, if we look at our collective consciousness, our collective level, we is a reflective of where we at in a collective level, how much knowledge of Kamal we have. If we had enough knowledge of Kamal, or Dr. Taheri always mentions that the problem of the world is بِمَعرِفَتِي. Ma'rifat is one of those words that is very hard to translate. It's almost impossible, but once we defined it as divine knowledge, but then it was God's, it was kind of like a quality knowledge. But ma'rifat is a very unique word. It's kind of like the root of it, it means cognition, the cognition of something, right? But in Erfan, we call it the cognition of quality world. So the cognition of quality world, the lacking of cognition of quality world, the lack of understanding of the quality world, the intricacy of it, the implication of it, the philosophy of creation, everything that we discussed, it's in there. So the lack of individuals or people's or collective understanding, it causes sufferings, wars, narcissism, superiority, famine, uh, epidemics, like so many different things. And the root cause of our problems, Dr. Tari says, is like lack of ma'rifat. And one of his books that is being actively translated by very dedicated individuals with a big heart is Insan, Humans and Ma'rifat. And it's one of the it's actually the first book I read when I got introduced with Erfan, and I couldn't put it down. It's such a um, beautiful book. But anyways, there it's very focused on this notion and the intricacy of the Kamal and the different aspects of it and the necessities and implications and so on. And actually, we'll discuss the topics throughout the course and we will get introduced to them. Uh, but anyways, coming back, so everything that we have, all the knowledges that we have within the human experience, it just subcategorized in two general categories: one Kamal, one power. And one, the consequences would be going toward unity, going toward Kamal, and one would be going toward power, superiority, and destruction and entropy and disorder. One goes toward unity, one goes towards multiplicity. Uh, Power, by definition, in order for it to have a definition or to exist, there has to be a weak. So it creates hierarchy of power, it creates superiority. And when there is superiority, then it means that one needs to be more powerful than the other. And that creates division and multiplicity right out the bat. So that's by definition, it's never something that can unify. So that's why if you want unification and unity, then the only thing that can unify us is Kamal and the knowledge of Kamal. And one of the issues with individual path and the mainstream um, spiritual culture really want to emphasize the individual path versus collective path. is that no matter how successful the individuals would be in their spiritual journey and Kamal journey, at the end of the day, it's unique to themselves and it only means to themselves and it cannot be useful for other people unless it's a collective path. And when it's a collective path, then it brings people together because everyone would be agreeing on certain same principles, not because someone said, but because they experienced it. So there's huge difference between a collective of people having a common agreement and inner heartfelt confirmation of an existence of an intelligence that they can utilize and um, improve in their spiritual journey, be protected, and so on and so forth, than billions of people having individual journeys, billions of different unique journeys that many of them gonna just conflict and contradict each other, and that never comes to unity because by definition unity means that all the parts needs to match, all the parts, and there's no contradictory parts. If the two individuals journey on their basis are contradicting each other, it means that they were never can be unified. And by definition a collective journey means that it's for everyone, everyone can use it with regardless of anything, regardless of their belief, their experience, their age, their race, their enthusiasm, so on and so forth. They can use it. Well, how much they can use it? Yes, it depends on how much they are dedicated, how much capacity they have, how much they are enthusiastic about it, how persistent they are, etc. But initial usage of it has no condition. So now a lot of these individual qualities, spiritual achievements becomes um, a two-sided blade and increased individual's ego. Whereas if there's a collective path, everyone are on the same page, everyone on the same level, because no one can really claim that their path is better or they've been longer in that path or they're more experienced in that path. Is the same path, it's for everyone, works the same, there is no difference, no one can claim any special uh, aspects or features from it individually. So that really stopped the formation of thousand different cults and gurus that basically make all the people dependent on them and so on. We had so many experiences of that in different cultures and different spiritual dynamics that I don't think I need to name them. I think a little bit of research you could come up with, if not hundreds, but many of them. So there is a word called keramat, and that was referred to some sort of spiritual mystical power. And keramat before Erfan Halgheh was, which was associated with power things, power knowledge, was associated with something good, a quality spiritual achievement that one would achieve. And if they can show it to other people, people would get really attracted to those because they would be regarded as someone highly spiritual or well achieved in the spiritual journey. But Erfan Halgheh defined keramat completely differently. And here it's where it talks about under the name of keramat, which is, let's say, is spiritual abilities, um, for the lack of better word. These keramats, under the name of keramats, the services of negative intelligence network were present and deviated spiritual individuals toward power. And Rumi has a very interesting poetry about this, that he talks about this power. He uses a metaphor of a halva, which is like a pastry, a sweet pastry. He says like that power is like um, using, like basically being attracted to sweet. something sweet and a pastry that is a food of children, kids. And if you be patient and let that go, then you get to the higher levels. So the uh, acknowledgement of the fact that there is this idea that there's this powers that it would be sweet, but if you uh, kind of restrain yourself from using it, then better things could come. He's not explicitly talking about anything like that. This is one of the poetries that Dr. Taheri used. He assumes that maybe he means the same. No one knows. There's no evidence, as he says, that uh, these poetries are the way that he thinks they mean, because using these poetries for references and connecting them to these notions, it causes a lot of misunderstanding that Dr. Tari had to actually elaborate on the fact that he was aiming to bring back life to Iranian Erfan by basically linking what he had as an epiphany and revelations to what they meant, maybe because they're very close, but no one knows. But then people thought that he's just using these poetries and putting them together very intelligently to come up with a new ways and creating a new Erfan, especially the ones that who didn't see the power in the Ettisals and Halghehs and regarded Erfan as just a new theoretical approach to Erfan. So we really don't know if they really meant what we mean here, but first time in the history, as far as I studied, and I challenge people to bring me resources that prove me otherwise, um, that there is this clear difference between positive and negative network, associating negativity with power and all the specific features that can come with it. And positive network being only associated with the knowledge of Kamal and what it can give within this framework of um, which we can basically see in the photo here. It is positive network. It has filters. The information should not be adversarial to justice, confidentiality, to Kamal, to free will, and etc. These are very, very clear pathways and clear filters for one to understand what type of information cannot come from positive network and what kind of information is exclusively related to negative network. So here we come to a very uh, important notion. But before I'll go there. I just want to talk about the last portion of this topic, which is the definition of illumination. Um, there's a specific term um, in Erfanic context in Farsi that is used in a very general sense, sometimes is misinterpreted, and Dr. Taheri saw the necessity for clarification, and that's Roshanbini. Uh, Roshanbini is like basically Roshan means illuminated, and Bini is like seeing. So this term associated with people to be able to actually access some of the negative network information and be able to see things that other people don't see, like for example, reading other people's characters, seeing what's going to happen, things like that. So Roshanbini, it's associated with some sort of ability that is a spiritual ability, but is power oriented. But here, Dr. Tari defines it in a very specific way. He says, like, it means that seeing clearly and seeing uh, with the presence of light and clarity. And that is toward the philosophy of existence, why the creation happens, where we came from, where are we going, for what purpose. And he talks about Roshanbini as having an eye with insight, uh, an eye from the heart, seeing with heart, not with logic. We have two eyes. The eyes of in the world of Erfan, we have two eyes: the eyes of logic and the eyes of brain and logic, the eyes of heart. And that's a metaphor for talking for insight. The Something that, for example, in our ancestors somehow knew what plants is good for what without being chemists, without having microscopes. And that is like an intuition, that intuitive insight that allow them to understand, almost like speak with the plants, but not in that sense that can, go to the negative intelligence network, talking to plants in a literal sense, talking to on a kind of like an essence level. So the ability to have that ma'rifat, to understanding of the ma'rifat, which is that innate level comprehension of quality knowledge, achieving the ability to read the book of existence, that is the most evident and clear signs of God's presence and God's existence, and God's mind. So Roshanbini is the consequence of a connection and a ittisal with the positive intelligence network. And it is not something that we can just claim to have, and is not something that we could forcefully acquire. And it is something that it's achieved in the world of Irfan, in the world of Ma'rifat, epiphanies, revelations, illuminations, and so on. So in some of the, as I mentioned, some of the schools of thoughts in the spiritual, or Irfanic, even Persian Irfanic spiritual schools of thoughts, the consequence of such a notion, which is Roshanbini, is the connections to negative intelligence network, which basically give individuals ability, power, to be more superior than others, which causes deviation for themselves and others. And that is where you're basically entering the um, discussions that we want to have in terms of the law of reflection. And I will explain deeper which um, which of these aspects work according to the revelations and epiphanies that we receive. So one of the most important laws that we learn in Erfan is the law of reflection. And people confuse this with karma, but this is not karma. Karma is a separate natural law. This is separate. Maybe it has some aspects or features of karma, but is much different than karma. So humans have the ability to choose, they have a free will. And the way in which they use their free will is through a specific enthusiasm to a notion, a concept, a specific direction. Each movement, thought, idea, word, action, aim, eye gaze, behavior that comes from human being has a consciousness emission, and there is enthusiasm behind it, and there is a free will that is being exercised and practiced in that regard. All of that process, a human being having an enthusiasm of something, and these are like so pronounced, maybe we don't realize it. Like when I say every movement, every action, every thought, and every eye gaze, they all have this emission. The human being are basically triggering this law by moving, breathing, thinking, anything that we do is a consciousness emission, and that's the way in which that we are using our free will, in which we are showing our enthusiasm in one way or the other. Now, this triggers natural law of reflection uh, every moment. And this would basically go pass through a filter called individual capacity comparison filter. In Farsi, we call it qiyas voz. And then it goes to God. Then God, according to the compatibility of such a enthusiasm, whether that is possible to come from positive network or whether it's possible to come from negative network, would basically deliver and execute those delivery through the agents, which are the positive and negative network. Now, the consequence of this reflection is the amplification of that state. So if what we ask or what we emit as a T-consciousness emission is positive, then the state in which that we are in, it amplifies, it gets positive amplification. So if someone is generous, they're using their free will and enthusiasm toward generosity, they become more generous. If they are stingy, let's say, then the negative um, attribute, negative emission would be amplified. So the negative state of amplification. So now that is about everything else. So everything that um, we put out there, we have this reflection. And this individual capacity comparison, there is actually a verse in Quran that it says that no one has a duty other than unless it's aligned with their capacity. So which means that each individuals have a certain capacity, and then um, they get obligated to fulfill that duty based on their capacity. And it's kind of like emphasizing on the fairness of God, that it doesn't ask someone to do something out of their capacity. So if someone just aims for the very, very high level and then increase their capacity, and then they have the capacity, then they are obligated to deliver as well by their own will. Now, based on this reflection, there is this, uh, which basically is its framework is justice as well, by the way. So one of the ways in which the justice is delivered by natural laws is through this law of reflection. So regardless of whether the individuals intentionally or unintentionally um, basically seeks something, they would either receive positive or negative guidance or misguidance as a result. This is really, really important because what happens is essentially that, let's say someone doesn't have a bad intention. They have the best intention in their heart. They're aiming for something, what they think it's good, and they're really showing their enthusiasm, and uh, they're using their free will toward that. If what they're asking, based on natural law that is pre-programmed, it only deliverable by negative network, regardless of the intention of the individuals and the reason that they're seeking it, they will receive it from negative network and they would be misguided. So if what we want and what we seek and what we ask are contradictory and not aligned with the natural law, if you're willingly seeking misguidance through those non-harmonious um, enthusiasms and approaches, then based on this law, which is the law of reflection, we would be misguided. Or if we ask something that is harmonious, and then it's deliverable by a positive network, it will be given. So there is references, يُضِلُّ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَيَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. It says like we will guide the ones if they want, and we will misguide if they want. And so it clearly says that if one would seek misguidance, they will receive it. And if they would ask for guidance, they also will receive it. Or the individuals that there's another reference also in Quran says like if someone would be uh, ignorant about the Rahmaniyat Ilahi, then uh, uh, Satan, a demon, on them to become their companion and their guidance, their companion and their friend. Sorry. So basically the consequence of the reflection on in one hand is the amplification of the reflection, the desire, and then on the other hand, it would be the awarenesses that comes. So the awareness of either it's positive or whether it's negative. So as I mentioned, the individuals are using their free will, showing their enthusiasm based on that, and based on law of reflection, what they're showing as their enthusiasm, whether let's say generosity, they become more generous because of law of reflection, and um, if they show stinginess, then by the law of reflection, they using their free will, showing their enthusiasm in that way. The law of reflection amplifies that, and then the individual becomes more stingy. And that's why you see that the individual have their specific attribute solidify and become more pronounced as they age, because the longer that they're around, the longer and harder they uh, use their free will in that specific way, and then that attribute amplifies more and more and more over the time, and then we see the amplification and at the end solidification sometimes, and becomes more rigid as we age to change certain things. But the good news is that we have the halghehs that can really give us one experience and help us to reprogram that over a second. So that's a great news. So um, this two aspects that are very important. Now, the consequence of these different awarenesses and information and epiphanies that we receive is positive awareness and negative awareness based on each network and the enthusiasm that we used. We have, if the positive awareness comes after using our enthusiasm in a harmonious way, uh, we have the information coming about the awareness toward the recognition, comprehension, and understanding of Kamal, philosophy of creation, and mystery of Genesis, the discovering of existential value of the self. These are really important. The positive awareness also, it's awareness towards recognition and comprehension and understanding of Kamal, understanding of unity of existence. I am the truth, which is Anal Haq, Jamal Yar, which is the face of an image of beloved, understanding of the quality of the presence, understanding of purposefulness of the creation, and so on. And then we have the negative awarenesses when it comes from that part, which causes the misguidance, which is the knowledge of power, showing off, superiority seeking toward others, or achieving earthly goals or personal benefits over the others, like powers such as probing into others, mind reading, or foreseeing future, personality readings, things like that, that some spiritual schools of thoughts would really consider as some sort of a spiritual reward. So here we have a very clear definition of what would be positive spiritual qualities and attributes, and what would be negative spiritual qualities and attributes. anything that is toward Kamal and unity, and anything that is toward power and multiplicity. Any questions so far? Okay, so let's talk about the filters that we see in the image one by one. One of the filters is basically the being adversarial to the justice. Um, any information that we receive, if it goes against justice, then it can't come from positive network, because by definition, the justice needs to exist, and without the justice, then there is uh, the violation of that rule, and then positive network would not violate the justice. So information that puts one that goes against justice, let's say if someone knows certain information about someone else, but they don't, they become superior, so that goes against justice. Along those lines, another filter is adversarial to Satar al-Uyubi, which is basically talking about one of the attributes of God, and that is about um, the confidentiality, the notion that God would not reveal individuals' deficiencies, and those are stay private and confidential. And only God would actually know about the essence of individuals and the quality within them. So any type of information that goes against that is against natural laws. Also, any awarenesses that goes against free will. The free will is such a fundamental notion in the philosophy of creation, and based on that, individuals are going toward Kamal, and the whole design is based on that. Without free will, then we would not have the capacity to choose and go. And for that, there wouldn't be any right or wrong to be done, because we didn't just have any options to choose, and we just had one choice to make, just like trees and animals. That, the apple tree cannot just decide to give pear or, pineapple. It just basically is defined as apple tree, and therefore it gives apples. So what we do have a choice. We can embody very negative attributes, and we can embody very positive ones. So the way in which that we are emitting and embodying the attributes, we are calling upon the execution agents that would become our friends or companions to deliver those specific requests. So anything that goes against free will, let's say any type of information that would goes against individual free will in such a way that they would make the decision for them, or they would tell them what to do. This type of informations cannot come from positive network, because it goes against free will, and it basically takes the responsibility of individuals' actions completely. And that's not the point of existence. We were supposed to come to the existence to make decisions by our free will and our awareness. And that requires us to be actually able to understand the ourselves, the purpose of creation, the philosophy of creation. So, and then think about the necessities, think about the choices, think about different aspects. So if something comes and tells us what to do, then there is no necessity uh, for us to think or become aware to make a right decision. So it is very important for the free will to not be negatively affected. A lot of individuals, they kind of enjoy that, because it's very easy for something to come and tell someone what to do. It's very easy and comfortable to just not think about anything and just do it, and not take the responsibility, because at the end of the day, someone can do something and say like, oh, something told me, or I felt like, or I was guided in this way, and it's not my fault. I was misguided. So a lot of the individuals that aim for such powers, after a while they actually get empty from themselves and become human beings that they have no will and becomes puppets of their some sort of inner thought or inner force. So it is very important to not allow any information that, or not be very enthusiastic, passionate about any information that goes against Kamal, goes against free will. So positive network only gives awarenesses and guidances regarding Kamal, as we said, that it's not directly telling individuals what to do and allowing them to make the final decisions themselves. It might give experiences or information that kind of portrays the consequences of each actions or things like that, but at the end of the day, it leaves the choices for the human beings themselves. It never tells one what to buy or what not, or who to marry or not, or who to divorce or when to divorce or not, or anything like that. Because individuals would be on these fork roads and they would be tested on those fork roads. And uh, in fact, we are um, getting challenged and tested by each of these two ways, and within those two ways we really show what we are about and how we are, and if we actually embody the qualities that we want to aim, and if we have self-awareness or not. So we have infinite numbers of two ways that we want to make the decisions, and make the decisions with an awareness. Also, from the perspective of an observer in a unipolar universe where there are no times and space dimension, and therefore there is no past, present, and future. The entire existence happened in a 0 second and ended, and also have not begun yet. And the past and present and future also exist simultaneously. So, based on such a theory, the destiny of human beings are clear, it's predestined, but that doesn't mean that uh, it doesn't mean that it's decided, and it is basically representing the final decision or the consequence of the final decisions of the human being based on their will, and they're not a puppet that just predestined for a specific scenario and they're just playing it. It is important to distinguish that. The power of entering individuals in a way of reading their mind, or captivating them, or um, reading their personalities. The boundary of human beings are very divine, and it is only a place that God's spirit can exist, and nothing else should be there. So nothing should actually violate that boundary in any way, and it needs to be regarded as something divine and respectful. One of the uh, tricks of Satan is to destroy this divinity of the boundary. So throughout different reasons to violate it, and in such a way, um, it encourage individuals for actions that would basically be justified in various ways. For example, understanding someone's personal problems can help someone help them, or so in that way, the violations of that boundary is justified, and people will allow themselves to actually achieve something, saying like, I'm gonna help the person by understanding their problems. But this is not the way that things work, or if not the way that is actually harmonious. So individuals, by being convinced by such a notion, use or utilizes these type of spiritual powers, and they think that their purity and their essence cause them to see the inside of other people and be able to extract those information, and they fall for this satanic trick and then get entertained by spending their life by reading individuals' inner world and inside, and basically even causing a lot of problems for others. So there are a lot of various negative intentions of people that can motivate them for such actions or powers, which is getting into individuals for the purpose of implementing their own thoughts or a specific thought or desire, um, implement or penetrating for a purpose of implementing their own will or a specific will, or read the minds or things like that. So we're gonna move forward with the one of the last topics we're gonna talk about, which is the reasons that the protective layer could be taken away, or the disconnections from T consciousness, cosmic T consciousness network. It is, we hope that by clarifying these terms, we avoid any potential problems in the future. And these are basically the factors we already discussed before in our certificate. And we just basically giving a reminder of those notes, and also that leads us to the connections with the certificate, which I highly encourage individuals to sign up and through the Academy, Dr. Taheri's websites, and sign up or the applications, install the application, and through that making login, and in there you can order your digital copy of the certificates. If you don't know how to do it, or if you need help, there are videos that show how to do it. We can forward that to you or help you do it. It is important to do that. There is a fee associated with it. I don't remember how much was the fee. I think it was about, I'm not actually sure. Maybe it was about $40 per document Canadian, which you can pay by credit card in the platform. I encourage you to get that certificate. And then that basically allows you to experiment with what we're gonna talk about after this points that we already discussed before, just for a reminder. So the decision of disconnection of from cosmic T consciousness network, and the lack of functionality of the protective layer is something that is decided by the T consciousness network itself, and it's something that no individuals have ability to do that. Basically, it's something that happens by the higher realm. So one of the reasons that could happen is any actions that could cause the disturbance or stop of the elevations of collective spirit of society, and the guidance and helping others toward the positivity consciousness network. And this is after you see the result. Avoiding or um, avoiding giving information and awarenesses about T consciousness network to individuals that are interested, enthusiastic, and not allowing them to easily access the T consciousness network and utilize this unconditional um, love aspects of existence toward Kamal, or providing faulty information and wrong and faulty information that it misguides the society toward a specific way, in such a way that the individual gains such abilities because they're holy, or they have a specific connections with some holy character or spiritual character, and that's how they acquired such abilities. And this causes individuals to feel hopeless and helpless, that they need to be someone special or with the special connections to be able to use this unconditional aspects of this divine rahmat of God. And this causes them to not be able to actually receive the awarenesses and epiphanies and access this T consciousness network simply, and be away from the main journey of illumination and divine quality, world recognition and understanding. We talked about that before. Um, Utilizing the abilities and powers of Halghehs against the what is beneficial for humanity, the inclination toward using the abilities and powers of T consciousness network toward things that would benefit individuals in a narcissistic or self-oriented way. Try to, you know, analyze individuals' characteristic, reading minds, or getting to their private or confidential information, or causing any sorts of a spiritual or physical damage or harm that could affect the individuals spiritually, or stop their growth, or affect their security and affect their safety in any way. That would basically go against the justice of God. Um, Having any sorts of um, um, choosing which person you want to give connections to. Any type of picking or choosing individuals to give the connections or not. That's also a violations. We should basically give to everyone with no conditions or no specific choices. Utilizing it against the respect of the consciousness network. For example, denial, doubt, or ungratefulness after receiving results and after having halted confirmation, after seeing results that would be, and this is something that really the T-Consciousness Network decides. No one knows what would categorize or classifies as sufficient um, experience and awareness when it comes to those type of things. For someone, maybe they get more time, or someone might be less, in the sense that someone might have an experience and the consciousness network decides that that was enough sufficient and should have the individuals to believe. Some people get more time. This is part of the hikmat and faith that no one knows how it works. The denial of their self, of the findings of the self, and hiding it, that would cause not glorifying the T consciousness network for others, to help them to also be introduced with the cosmic T consciousness network, and keeping them unaware. Also, kind of pretending that these type of activities or abilities are coming from any type of source other than Unity Halde or the T Consciousness Network, the Divine Rahmaniyat Ilahi. Any type of misuse of in the name of T Consciousness Network, or putting any type of holy name, religion, or any type of spiritual figure at the top of these type of abilities other than God and the T consciousness network, which is goes against the one of the principles, which is Iyaka nasta'in, which means that we only seek from God and nothing else. So because of that, we would like to um, remind individuals that these type of violations could result disconnections of the um, protective layer, and the consequences that comes with it. It's completely on individuals' responsibility. There is another part of the last discussion, which is really important. I will just briefly explain this because it has its own session to be discussed, and that's the principle of the unity of the path. Uh, Based on this principle, all the parts and aspects of one path should not contradict with each other and should be aligned. And any type of contradiction along with or within the parts of this path would render individuals confused and misguided. So the introduction to T consciousness network, cosmic T consciousness network, and practically observing the way in which that the T consciousness and intelligence works, and the fascinating transformation that can come as a result of the etisal and all the positive activities that would put humans in relation to their Kamal journey, and every day become more astonished and amazed by this divine unconditional love, um, helping them to really have an understanding of the unity that exists among the existence, the unity that exists within all the parts of existence and connects every part to each other. And all of those parts are at the same time all giving one message of the unification and unity. It is important to understand that every part of this path is coherent and aligned with each other. Therefore, mixing any other path or anything else other than outside of the Erfan Halgheh to the practices or to the teachings is also not only causing individuals confusion and not allowing them to have a clear conclusions for themselves. It also a violation to the integrity of the teaching. Therefore, in, we invite individual to avoid mixing anything while they're practicing Irfan Halghe, only doing the etisals and connections as we explained, so that they can, at least meanwhile, so they can have a conclusion whether this is something that they would like to pursue or not. If they don't, then, they had an experience, it didn't work, or didn't want it, they just move on with their life. But in order for them to have enough understanding and good conclusion that whether that's is a good, that it worked, it requires to be experienced and approached by its own rules, respecting how it's presented. So if you want to get the best result, we really encourage everyone to just do what we're suggesting in the course and do it as such and not mixing anything else. It does not need for anything else to be mixed because this is coming from T consciousness network, the highest consciousness that creates this existence. So there is nothing above it that it can, or not, it's not incomplete. It's complete on itself. We just need to allow its effect and experience it. If we experience it, then we are sure that we didn't do anything else that could potentially be the factor. So that allow us to be a researcher and have a good research plan in such a way that it doesn't create any doubts or confusion for making such conclusion. So that's that for the theoretical material for tonight. Let's do a 15 minutes at Tasal before we come back and answer some questions and let you go. Thank you so much. Let's do a 15 minutes at Tasal and we will be back in 15 minutes. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone would like to share or any question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Um, the difference of love, reflection, and karma. What is that?
Right.
Can you explain a little bit more?
Yes, good question. Yeah, of course. Okay, so the difference between the law of karma and the law of reflection is that karma is uh, usually associated with what we do, what we get back, what we see, it's what we sow, and it's something that it's not um, related to, let's say, the information that we receive. It's not about, um, it's not related to sometimes even the um, emissions that we emit. So there are some fundamental differences when it comes to uh, the difference between law of reflection and karma. Law of reflection is, as we discussed, for example, let's say it starts with someone showing an enthusiasm for a specific attribute, um, let's say, um, a spiritual experience, for um, anything, pretty much anything that someone um, shows enthusiasm. And then they get a reflection based on what they um, what they put, and then there's this filter, and there's positive network and negative network. The administration of it, the execution of it is different than karma. Karma usually associated, well, there's different type of karma explained. For example, there's this mainstream karma that is associated with incarnation. Let's say they say like someone had a past life and then they had a bad karma, and then if they're in a bad situation here, it's because of their bad karma, and if they're rich, is because of their good karma that they've done in their past life. Also, some people understand it as a consequence of their action. And their action, if you're good with people, you get good, and if you get bad with people, you get bad. So there's a lot of reducive oversimplification and um, kind of different type of operation altogether, and it doesn't have the intricacy that we're talking about here. It has nothing to do with, let's say, emission of it, or whether the amplification or amplification of the attributes of people. Um, it doesn't have anything to do with the natural laws in a way that it's linked to the philosophy of creation, in a way that whether it would be power oriented or camel oriented, or whether it would be guiding or misguiding in terms of the spiritual experiences or spiritual path and journey. So there's a lot of assumptions about what that word is, but this general understanding of people in terms of karma is what they get back, and as a result of their behavior that they put forward. And for example, there's the law that we discuss um, in third course, and in third course there's various different laws that we discuss. One is the um, equal opposite reaction, and then one is the action and reaction. And the action and reaction is basically has some aspects of karma as well. For example, it says like any action that we put, there's a reaction. It's just like um, because of the uh, duality world, the world of opposition, and any of our actions and thoughts has that reaction. And Dr. Tara talks about like the world is like a mountain that the voice is resonate has this resonance, and then the deflection comes back at us, and that there's no actions of people that would in a very apparent and non-apparent way would have a reaction. And that is the part of aspects of God, which is Allahul Sariul Hisab, which is it says like the God is like immediately calculates or basically responds, and the consequence of those actions are in a law in place. For example, when it comes to negative state, it doesn't matter why we go to negative state. As soon as we go there, then our body becomes poisoned, and that's like immediate action happening uh, as a result of that non-harmonious operation. So there are a lot of fundamental differences between the karma, depend on if you're talking about the mainstream definition of karma. Are we talking about the closest law that resembles karma in Erfan Halgheh, or are we talking about like law of reflection? So there are some differences. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Any other questions? No question? Okay. All right. So the last experience we want to explore is with the um, it's with the certificate, the connection with the certificate. And as I mentioned, I really encourage you to sign up and then get your certificate. If you got it, once you got it for just this purpose, you can print it out and in a deemed room, deemed light, you can hold it, and with a approximate distance of maybe half a meter or a meter or 2 meter, it doesn't matter. In a dim light, just you want to stare at that certificate, and through that you're gonna see some changes in the logo, in your face, your image, the texts. Things gonna change. And this experience are putting a lot of questions that are we only one person or multiple people, or are we just having, do we have just this form, or do we have other forms? Is this realm that we're living is the only realm? Is the language that we're seeing is the only form of the language here? So there are things that is going to change and put some questions, and it's a very interesting experience. Also, like kind of reprograms our logical filter in a very good way. So I encourage you to sign up for the certificate, get yours and print one just for the purpose of this exploration. Uh, that obviously doesn't have any other value, because if you want a hard copy that has the legitimacy, you need to order the hard copy from this from Dr. Tari directly. So this printout would be just for the sake of exploration of this specific etisol, just for the sake of experiencing it, and just kind of like seeing that is possible, and having that experience. Anyone have any question? Was that clear? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for confirming. I'm just gonna recap really quickly the law of reflection, because it's very important before we go. Um, some of the aspects I think that is very important for us to just revisit, and then I'll let you guys go. So, in terms of the law of reflection, any action, thought, behavior, movement has an emission, a consciousness emission. And this consciousness emission is a representative of individuals' enthusiasm toward a specific quality or a specific concept. Regardless of individuals' intention, this emission would go up to the higher realm, to God, passing through a filter called individual capacity comparison. And then based on the compatibility of that enthusiasm, whether the answer could be received by negative network or positive network, would be reflected back to us. And it either amplifies the positive state if it's harmonious, or amplifies the negative state. With the reference of Quran that I mentioned, the God says, like, we will guide them if they want, and we will misguide them if they want. And if they seek misguidance, we put demons as their friends and companions to be with them. So it shows that there's the possibility that regardless of the individual's intention, if they are not aware of the natural laws, they would seek something, or a concept or attribute, a path, or anything that would not be harmonious with the natural laws. So they would not leave any other possibility other than to be delivered by negative network. If it's delivered by negative network, then the consequence of that is the agents, which are the demons or non-organic viruses, as a reference of Quran, to be as a companion and friend of the individuals causing the misguidance. The misguidance comes through the amplification of negative states, negative thoughts, negative actions, negative behavior, negative perception, and it creates a loop. That loop would basically get amplified and amplified and amplified, and bring more and more negative consequences. So one of the most important thing in Erfan Halgheh is to understand the natural laws, the way it's presented, and using the halghehs to have that confirmation, and aiming to use the halghehs to implement and achieve quality, embody those qualities, work on the fundamental necessities for us to remain in a positive state, aim for the unity oriented aspects and approaches in order for us to not unintentionally seek something in a way or a notion that would not be harmonious with natural laws, so that the consequence would be receiving it from negative network, and the consequences would be chaos, disorder, and multiplicity. So what we want to do is to um, be able to increase our understanding about the natural laws, understanding these filters that we discussed, and understanding the unity-oriented approach to the intelligence and to the consciousness network and the Kamal, so that we are protected along the way, and that resistant force against us for aiming for higher qualities of embodiment would not overcome our enthusiasm and persistency and determination. With that, I'm gonna finish this theoretical parts of the last session of the first course. We completed that. I also want to congratulate everyone especially people that they sign up for a new academy program for receiving the halqeh, the whole halqeh. And Dr. Taheri announced the availability of the whole halqeh for um, individuals that they enrolled in new academy course, which basically means it includes all the halqahs that he have been released and the halqahs that he hasn't been talked about yet, and the protective layer all associated with it. So it's the halqah that includes everything. There is nothing more to be given on a practical level. And it is a very, very interesting experience to have. I have been constantly having experiences with this holiday since it was released. So I really encourage you to sign up for the new course, new curriculum through Taheri Academy, and you can use the application as well. The same application that you're going to use for your certificate enrollment. You can use it to enroll for the new academy course. There is a fee, but it definitely worth it. And I highly encourage everyone to do that. It's a great news for humanity as well, as this is a new pivotal moment for human history to be exposed to such a capability, accessible for all the human beings on Earth. So I highly encourage everyone to look that up. And if you need help, let us know. We will be happy to help you to set that up. So with that, I wish you a great night and see you next week. We will continue to have the courses from next week. We will have the first session of second course next week and move forward with the material and the halqahs. So if you don't have any question or anything, I wish you a great night and see you next week.